Hey, we're back with another quick take. This is the Edge podcast for CHROs. I'm Varun, and I've got my co-host Nisha. We've got a very special guest today, and we're talking about something that I think we haven't addressed yet, and then we sort of feel guilty about it. That across the pandemic, our areas have also suffered equally more than anybody else. In the fact that we've always relied on our managers, on the CHROs, and everybody else higher up to sort of be the beacon of hope in these times. For a bunch of factors, right? And I think it's very important to also acknowledge that hey, they also face burnout just like the rest of us. And we've got Ishani today, who's an expert on this topic, and we're going to be discussing a lot about this. So stay tuned for the rest of the episode. Let me just quickly introduce Nishani as well. So Ishani is an accomplished scientist who's now reimagining diversity solutions for today's enterprises. She's extremely passionate about connecting people to their calling in the process of hoping to make a dent in India's diversity ratio at the workplace. She's the founder of Serene Inc. So at Serene, they use behavioral science to drive organizational change. And they do this by offering a range of services like unconscious bias trainings, leadership development, training for prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace, gender sanitization, sensitization, to name a few. So the long-term organizational policies sort of include implementation of inclusion coefficient and pay parity analysis. So the specialization basically around all of these aspects is to focus on customized content for diversity of all forms, right? That includes your gender, your age, differentially abled employees, LGBTQA class, and then you've got your caste and religion as well, right? So all of these things that Ishani and her sort of organization have sort of been doing for the last 5 6 years or so. Ishani and Nisha, I'll let you leave the floor to you guys as well. Ishani, tell us more about yourself, and Nisha, please introduce our guest and take it ahead.
Thank you so much, Varun. That was a very nice introduction, and thank you for having me on the podcast.
Thanks for joining us, Ishani. Yes, gender sanitization is not a very bad thing as well, Varun.
I mean, yeah, I totally misspoke. I mean, it happens. Is slip of tongue. It's sensitization, but either way, right? I mean, even though I've just misspoken, like sort of, it's been like a slip of tongue. But in India, it's a lot bigger than that. Just a slip of tongue. People have just outright skipped using the word altogether, right? And there's a very scary nuance and a very scary silence that's happening in between both of those things. And it's important that people like Ishania sort of exist and sort of hold the entire the culture aspect of every organization accountable. Like it's more than just marketing. It's bring at least people, at least on the least common denominator, to take things, to even talk about bigger things, right? And I think that's where I think we severely lack. And but it's good that at least the generation from here and the organizations that have to come
Yes,
from here are definitely at a very bright place. So
true. That's
Ishani,
a
really
very well.
thanks. Sorry, what were you saying? Sorry, you
No,
was
that's a
interrupting.
very nice way to look at it. Unless this conversation start, the next generation is going to have something to move forward with. That's a beautiful point. Yes.
Yeah. No, and also thank you for doing what you do because you're a scientist. And, the first time I met you, also, I was quite amazed that you're a scientist, who's kind of looking at, diversity. But I'm not surprised either because, within scientists as well, I'm sure that this topic or this divide exists. So Ishani, before we get right in and talk about burnout for leaders, do you want to give us your own backstory in like a quick minute? Because I know you have a very interesting backstory.
All right, Nisha. Absolutely, I'm happy to speak about it. Yes, I was a scientist in my last life. I did my PhD in applied mathematics. I was studying astrophysics. Did my postdoc from Oxford in biomathematics. So we were building a virtual human heart and doing computation on those customized virtual human heart. So yes, I have always used mathematics to look at real world problems. When I moved back to India and started working in aerospace research, the whole, just like you mentioned, the diversity and the skewed gender ratios were looking at me very directly, that how few women scientists are there, how few women in leadership positions who are from a scientific background. That is what started the idea of Serene. And me and my co-founder, who comes from a behavioral science background, I come from a scientific background. Together, we wanted to do research and understand what is stopping India from becoming truly diverse, what is stopping India from becoming truly inclusive. So we use a lot of data, we use a lot of behavioral science. We have a team of behavioral psychologists, criminologists who talk about psychological safety. We have lawyers, we have film producers. So together we have this eclectic bunch. We are trying to make a dent into the diversity and inclusion, belongingness, well-being, overarching concept of inclusion and well-being in a company.
And I love how you've picked professions where diversity is, or I don't know, I'm thinking it has providentially happened that all of these professions you see fewer women in, whether it is
Very
lawyers
true.
or filmmakers or whatever you mentioned. So that is,
Very true.
I just think, Varun and I have this responsibility sometimes to bring out things like this, and we feel really happy when we have people like you on the show. So, Ishani, let's get right in, right? You and I were talking, and we said, I mean, you brought out this brilliant point that I had never thought about before. You said that in the last 15 months, you have noticed, that yes, well-being and mental issues and yeah, sorry, I would say mental well-being rather has been a huge topic of conversation, sometimes very loosely used. Like, I mean, even I just said something which may not have been correct. So how, and but every time we mention it, it is always mentioned from the context of the employee. But unfortunately or fortunately, we have never spoken about those at the helm of it, right? Whether it is managers, whether it is CEOs, whether it is CHROs. We have expected that throughout the pandemic, they know how things should be steered. For some reason, I mean, we've assumed that they know it all. So, Ishani, tell us a little more about what have you noticed in this aspect, right? Why have people started coming to you, and what do they tell you when they come to you? I think if we can cover this trend that you're noticing.
Absolutely, Nisha. Thank you so much for bringing up this very important topic, something that is really not being spoken about often enough. First of all, what I want to do is acknowledge the pressure that comes with responsibility. When we talk about leaders, there is a lot of responsibility that is hanging on their shoulders. While the pandemic is, just like you said, continuing on for almost 15 months, in the beginning itself, a lot of leaders, business leaders saw that their businesses were suffering significantly. They were working very hard to even keep the businesses afloat, right? While we shut down completely, there was a lot of impact on the economy. So first and foremost, there was the huge responsibility of keeping the business going, making sure that they don't come to a position where they have to let people go, and all the while taking on this responsibility, making sure that the employees are doing well. So this amount of pressure, the financial pressure, the economic pressure that they were taking was astounding over the first few months. But that is not when it was talked about at all. People were talking about employee well-being at that time, but not at all about leadership well-being, for example. When the second wave hit, for example, what we started noticing was the emotional burnout, the depression that came along with it, because a lot of leaders were expected to do something called grief counseling, right? When an employee suffers through loss or grief or going through a very bad time, they're coming to the leadership, they're coming to the CHROs, they're coming to the HR box and speaking about it. And day in and day out, over months, they're listening to people's grief, people's loss. They're trying to help them out when they're going through um, for example, financial difficulties. They're not able to get a bed in the hospital, for example. This constantly, these conversations are happening with the leadership. So the emotional burnout, the emotional fatigue that they were going through, the leadership, that was significant. Slowly, leaders or HR leaders started recognizing that this is not an easy task. They are not trained counselors to be able to take so much emotional burden. So the anxiety also, it had triggered, these conversations triggered the anxiety, that when you hear so much about grief of others, that triggers the anxiety of their own safety, their own family's safety, which in consequence triggers poor eating, poor sleeping, for example, which has a long term effect on the health of these people who are bearing the responsibility. So now over the last few months, for example, we are consistently coming across the instances or conversation talking about leadership well-being, looking at the burnout that they're facing, looking at the stress, the anxiety, the long-term physical impact that they are facing. So that is something which we have noticed in the last few months quite a bit, Nisha.
Got it, Ishani. And it's such a pity, right, that, unless you didn't bring it out, or, in a conversation, it wasn't even something, we were thinking about, because we were always thinking about how organizations are supporting employees through this. It was always one way, right? It was never about, oh my God, how is the CEO feeling, or how is the CHRO feeling? That never came to our mind.
But even then, right? I agree that none of that came to our minds as well. But even when all of this was happening, I mean, it's good to acknowledge that they were still thinking about, hey, how do we restructure our employees' leave policies, or how do we give them better perks, or how do we make sure that they're paid at least consistently, right? So I mean, it's pretty commendable how they sort of pulled this off. But then I also feel that there's some region specific nuances to this entire thing, and that's something that we'd like to sort of dive deeper right now. If you've got any case studies that you can share, and specific incidents that you can point out that you can sort of have a good discussion upon.
Absolutely. This is a very important question, Varun, and there are two sides of it. And once I point it out, you will see how interesting the two sides are. One is that this anxiety that we are talking about, the concept of well-being, it is very country agnostic. Because we are working in a virtual environment, we are able to reach out to people who are in different parts of the world. But what we notice is that the reality, the anxiety, the loss and grief is very similar, no matter which part of the world you are. Because some people we notice are in isolation. They're probably they were in their workplace and not able to travel back home or be with their families. So there is that concept of isolation for many. For some people, when they travel back home, for example, they were in a space where with a lot of people, along with not having their own private space, for example. That is something that is not very easy to manage. Good exercise, good sleep, good working environment, for example, that is something that we notice no matter which part of the world. That was a reality for many. Oftentimes there is a lot of responsibilities that people have to take up on their elderly parents, of children, while managing work from virtual environments. So these kind of challenges were completely country agnostic, no matter which part of the world our participants were sitting in. They were echoing all of these thoughts. But another thing we have to notice when we are working in Southeast Asia, for example, is how different certain people's realities are from our own realities, right? I'll give you some examples. Often when we work in a network of corporates or startups, we look around and we see people, that most people are working from home, like you and me. That's a very privileged class, right? That we have got to work from home for the last 15 months. We did not have to venture out unless needed, right? We overlook the fact what is happening in tier 2, tier 3 cities, for example. I'll give you example of manufacturing sector. People who are in the factory setting, the people had to go to work in those industries, had to be around other people. And when they came back from their workplace, they were worried about the safety of their family members. That was a very isolating experience, that they had to go out. There was no choice. They had to go out, be in the factories, make sure they're running smoothly. And then they were back at home where their families were exposed to that, right? So these are constant fear, anxiety and stress that they went through. a lot of people. You asked for case studies. I'll tell you about the FMCG, the retail industry, for example. We were fortunate that the retail industry, the FMCGs, the shops, they were open, so we were able to get our provisions. We were able to get our big basket delivery, for example, right, while we were stuck at home. But the people who are working in these warehouses, the workers had continuously been working in a closed space. They had to go to work. They were in a closed space with other people, coming in contact with other people, right? The management of these companies did excellent work. If you look into the case studies, for example, they did absolutely amazing work of improving the conditions of these workers who are working in the factories or the warehouses, for example. um, when we talk about case studies, I love to give you specific examples. There was a lot of work that was done in making sure the warehouses were properly ventilated. They were not in a closed space. They were making sure that there were shifts, for example, where there were less amount of people doing the work, making sure employees had a place to stay, so they did not have to travel back home, and they were not in fear of infecting their in their families. So there was a lot of work that was done in the retail and the FMCG industry at the cost of companies' resources, for example. But the stark reality still remained that people had to go to work, and a lot of anxiety and mental health issues arising because of that. So I'm very, very happy that you brought up the topic of how region specific it is, because not all of us had the privilege of staying at home, working from home, taking care of our families while we did that. So thank you for bringing that up.
Shani, see, I think one thing the pandemic has done is, to make these conversations a little more common, about mental well-being, right? So, our question to you is, how can they be normalized? And earlier, we used to shy away from them, especially when it came to people who held power positions, right? They always had to be the strong ones. And I don't think this is even a point of being strong or weak. We're just human, right? And we adapt, or we react sometimes to the situation and the circumstances around us. So why do we look at people as strong or weak, depending on their emotional status, right? We are all human, and that should be equal. Whether you are a CEO, whether you're a CHRO, you're a founder, you're allowed to break down, and that's okay, as long as um, you know what is happening to you. So how should these conversations be normalized? And in a situation when we have to deal with other people, Ishani, it's one thing to be normalized and say, hey, I'm not feeling very good. But I think the bigger question is that if Varun and I are talking, and if I'm telling Varun that, hey Varun, I'm not feeling very good, or let's say in this forum, how should I know that I will not be judged, or my capabilities will not be judged after that, and my not feeling good will not impact my promotion or my my future career, right? How should we normalize it therefore?
So wonderful question, Nisha. And you bring up so many nuanced thoughts on the expectations of feeling strong or looking coming across as strong. Very true. The conversations on mental health has always been difficult, right? It not only is difficult to have the conversation, take a step back. It is difficulty arises from the fact that I can't identify and accept myself that I need help as opposed to somebody else, right? I need to reach out to a counselor and request help. That is accepting to myself that I'm not doing well. So speaking out openly about it is never easy. When you need help, there are a lot of cultural aspects to it, right? In a culture where you're not used to speaking about mental health, it takes a long time for us to take that step and reach out to a counselor and identify that I am the one who needs a little bit of help to wake up in the morning, to get going, to take care of other people. There are societal expectations. This is not uncommon, as are for parents, for example. How often parents say that I'm not doing well today, it's difficult for me to take care of a child. You put up a brave face and you try to get on with it, right? Similar to the people who are leading an organization, eh, you are reluctant to show that I am not capable at the moment of taking care of the people who rely on me. It's a very difficult conversation to have yourself as a leader. You might as well try to push yourself and get the work done if somebody else is not feeling well, but to accept that you are also burning out in that process. So we have thought through this a lot, how this conversation should be normalized, at least should be made uh, commonplace enough that people seek help when they need it. One is to have people that you can trust, not just the leaders. Try to have people of trust, a committee, for example, where other people can reach out. They are trained to a certain extent. So what we have been seeing is that this beautiful concept of, inclusion champions, they are in the organization. Even the smallest startups, even if you don't have a DNI council, you do still have the committees who deal with things which are sensitive in nature, such as sexual harassment. They are trained to deal with sensitive information. They are trained to know how to speak to a person who is going through a tough time. So what we are seeing, this beautiful thing that is emerging, is even the smaller startups, however small they are, they have that committee who is becoming an inclusion and well-being champion. So these trained people where people can reach out if something is not going well. They are the ones who every month try to keep the conversation on well-being going forward. So if people are going through loss, for example, grief, for example, isolation, for example, they would know there are these people who I can reach out to and ask for help, whether I require a counselor, whether I want to have a platform to voice my opinion when I'm not able to manage my time well, whether I need to, how can I reach out to my manager and tell that I'm not able to manage my time very well. So these are these trusted source of people who are emerging to be very useful at a time like this in order to help out employees. Another one is policies. I'm very glad that Varun mentioned policies. I'll give you an example. VMware, as you know, has as a paid leave for towards bereavement. So this is called bereavement leave, right? So anybody who has gone through a loss of a close family member, and they have this beautiful, even a pet is included in that. So anybody who has gone through a loss of a close family member, they can take up to 2 weeks off. I should look up exactly how much, but as far as I remember, it is 2 weeks towards bereavement. That's a beautiful policy. What that will do is, once you put that in place, no matter who that person is, they are likely to take that. Whether I'm a leader, whether I'm an employee, whether I'm a manager, I'm in the HR folk, I have that policy to fall back into. I'm not that worried how will I come across. Yes, I have suffered bereavement. I might as well take advantage of that policy and take some time off for myself. So having these policies, these are some organizational guidelines, really do help in normalizing the conversation, or making sure people who are unlikely to ask for help to take advantage of that policy and take a time out, take some breather for themselves. So these are the two things that can really help in normalizing the conversation, making sure it continues on even when we come out of the pandemic.
Shani, sort of extending on what you just said, right? One of the things, I think this is the last question for this segment that we have. How can people start using vulnerability as a leadership style? And I think right now that's going to be a very good linchpin to sort of propagate these conversations in a way that they actually become actionable, policies and a bunch of these things, right? How do you think people can, of all levels, if for that, how can people do that?
It's a wonderful question, Varun. It is tough. It is tough. I'm not saying that it's a very easy thing to do. One of the things that we have been noticing, and a lot of conversation going on, is the change in leadership style. Why are we hailing people say, for example, world leaders who are from a diverse background, who are women world leaders, for example, who have done excellent job of making sure that their countries have done well during the pandemic. We have been noticing their leadership styles. We have been actually applauding their leadership styles. Several countries where we have noticed that world leaders who are used to listening to a diverse point of view, who have a diverse cabinet, for example, who are used to listening to their scientific community, they have done the best in actually helping their countries through the pandemic. So the conversation around leadership is changing slowly. We are noticing that being inclusive, being a person from a minority background often helps in changing. So my hope would be that we do not forget that, we keep in mind that the leadership qualities are changing. So showing empathy or talking about empathy, talking about compassion, talking about vulnerability, these stay on with us, and we keep taking this forward, and we don't go back to the status quo that we had earlier. So Varun, I like your question. I'm not sure it's an easy thing to do, but fact that the conversation has started around that is a very, very positive step.
Nisha, would you add to like to add to this as well?
Yeah, just one last thing. Ishani, you mentioned, that there are inclusivity champions and things like that now, and probably, going forward, there will be an inclusivity board, where people, like there are people for other policies as well, right? So, who's training these people, Ishani? Do you guys come into the picture there? Are you training them? Because these are new roles, right? And these are new conversations. So who is kind of, who can become one? Because it's also a huge opportunity to the audience that we're speaking to. So how do you train somebody to kind of become an inclusivity champion in your organization? And currently, how is that happening? And if you can throw some light on the team structure per se and how to train that team, it'll be great.
Wonderful question, Nisha. How can you actually practically go about doing that? So, as you know, that we do have the leadership, we do have the managers who can be trained to have an empathetic conversation, which is something that we always emphasize on. One other thing, when I said the inclusivity champions, I'm talking about the internal committee that every company has. You have a sexual harassment committee, right? They are trained not only on the law, we often train them on how to be proactive champions of safety and inclusion, right? So even a company, as per the law, as small as 10 people company, they're supposed to have that posh committee. So while we are working from home in a virtual environment, the instances of sexual harassment has not been as much as when we were in physical space, but the committee still exists, and they're still trained in the conversation of keeping things confidential, keep when we are talking about a sensitive issue. So those are the committee members we are training, and we are proactively training them in several things. We do their well-being sessions on their well-being. So when you hear something which is sensitive in nature, how do you communicate to the person? And if you know that these are the well-being communications, then you can also reach out to your employees, the team members, and help them out when they require. So these are the committees we're training on their well-being and having a conversation, broader conversation with the employees. We also train them on how to be emotionally available, or how to understand your emotions and be empathetic, for example. So there are conversations that leadership and these internal committee members are having on how to have an empathetic conversation, what compassion means, what are the balance between positive and negative emotion, to be able to come across as a more, just like Varun mentioned, right? You utilize your vulnerability, you come across as a more balanced person, where emotions are as important as productivity, for example, in the company.
Makes a ton of sense. So yeah, I think that brings us to the close of this episode as well. But I think before we sort of close this, there's something that it's an anecdote I read on Twitter. I think it seems super apt. While India is sort of still viewed as a third world country in a lot of aspects across the world, but given that this entire remote has sort of offsetted that and sort of brought us into the remote first world or into the virtual world. I think here we've got a very standing chance to becoming a first world country here, better than anybody else out there. Primarily because we get to have conversations like these, and also because of the fact that these conversations like these are becoming more and more normalized across all age groups. And I think when this is there alone, there's nothing stopping us from not just being the first world country there, but also out here in the real world as well. So, Ishani, again, it was brilliant talking to you as well. I think I've personally also enjoyed having this a very energetic dialogue as well, especially on a Saturday. So that's been brilliant. Other than that, everyone, please subscribe to our newsletter as well. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We also shot an episode with Dr. Sana as well, which was entirely on psychological safety in creating a lot of these things at work. So we link that episode down here in the description as well. Be sure to check that out. I mean, it's a Sunday. Feel free to binge on it as well. It's really brilliant. Again, thanks a lot for being a part of this. Nisha, again, has been super nice co-hosting this with you. We'll see you very soon. This is the Edge podcast for CHRs with me and Nisha. Thanks
Yeah,
a lot.
one
Yeah,
second.
sure.
Ishani, how can people reach out to you, and
Yeah.
why should they reach out to Serene, Ishani? I really,
Is LinkedIn okay though?
we never do this on an episode, but I think just because of the work you do, right? I really feel like you
I think
should
it's people
offer
should
it.
reach out actually. People
Yeah,
just
yeah,
should just drop in a hi at least, that.
yeah. So please, if you can quickly tell people how should they reach out to you, especially in these
Absolutely.
times.
Definitely. So, my name is Ishani Roy. You can look me up on LinkedIn, reach out to me personally. You can reach out to any member of the Serene team. Our website is www.serene.in, SEREIN.in. You can look us up. You can drop us an email at hello@serene.in. But like I mentioned, I'm personally very, very happy to have a conversation, connect to people to the right person, so that we can take this conversation forward on well-being and not just drop it after we come out of the pandemic.
Right. All of those links again will be there in the description. So it's always going to be there. Please check it out too. Again, so yeah, thanks a lot for being a part of this. This was an amazing episode again. Thanks everyone.